set? Okay. Okay, we're going to, I'm going to begin the meeting, if I may. First of all, I am Steve Ferguson. I'm the Mayor of Prince Edward County. And I'd like to welcome everybody for coming to this meeting this evening. Your participation and interest is certainly very appreciated. Let me provide some introductions as to who is here. We have members of council here who are generally seated over there. Our CAO, Marcia Wallace, is here. And we have senior staff and consultants at the table at the front, and Marcia will be introducing them in a minute. Just some housekeeping items. The fire exits are located here, that door, and out through the back. There are washrooms over there, if you have a need. And we had out front several sign-in sheets. If you have not signed in, we would appreciate you doing so, just so we can keep you informed of any additional information that may arise out of this evening. Now, I fully recognize that there are many questions concerning water and wastewater. And there has been a considerable amount of conjecture, speculation, misinformation, hearsay, a whole bunch of different things. And the purpose of this meeting is to explain exactly what the municipality is undertaking and why. And we have with us the staff members who are fully capable of responding to questions so that everybody understands this very complicated, these very complicated projects, and they are very complicated. But what we want to accomplish is, as I say, to provide the information from our trained consultants, and additionally to answer your questions. So what we're going to, as I say, accomplish, I hope, walk out of here, we will all walk out of here confident that we've provided all the information that you need so that you understand the projects that we are undertaking. Also, there will be questions about costs, and I know there are questions about population, and all that material has been provided on the boards in the back, and I hope everybody had an opportunity to go through them so they understand. So I will say that everybody in this room, particularly our staff and our consultants, as well as the elected officials, are doing their absolute best. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Marcia, who is our CAO, who will introduce the panel, and we'll get the presentations from them, and following that we will open the floor to questions and answers. So I will ask the CAO to come over, and you want to stay there? CAO is going to remain seated.
Thanks very much, Mayor. So thanks very much for everyone for coming. I'm just going to introduce the panel and then give a little context for the presentation. We've got Peter Moyer, the Director of Development Services, Amanda Carter, our Director of Finance and IT. Put up your hand. Michael Michaud, our...
You still won't be able to see me.
You want to stand up, Peter? Peter's standing up now. We've got Michael Michaud, the Manager of Planning. David McPherson, our Manager of Engineering. We've got the Senior Project Manager at SEMA, one of our consultants. Bradley Young, sorry, I forgot his name. And then we have Jamie Cook, Managing Partner at Watson Economists, another one of our consultants. So any one of us can answer questions as we move through this. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the principles in terms of how we make decisions and where we're coming from. So as staff and as our consultants working together for council and for the community, there's some things we always try to keep in mind. So fundamentally, our objective when building infrastructure to support the community is to keep the rates stable or to find ways to lower rates. That is the objective. We are in a difficult situation. Those of you who went to the Bloomfield meeting would have seen some of this, or you can see it in the regional study that we're starting to look at. We're a community that, as everyone knows, was amalgamated in the late 90s. It is a number of systems that got combined together, but not physically combined. They're not connected. And it's a very expensive way to operate for a community of our size. And given the number of people in this community that live in the rural part versus the settlement and towns, we're looking at 6,500-ish ratepayers trying to pay for all of the water infrastructure and wastewater infrastructure we have on the rate base. So that is a challenge, and so we are looking for ways always to stabilize those rates or find ways to lower them and look for opportunities in that context. When we look at infrastructure capacity, we are in a situation in Wellington where we do not have any more capacity to hook new development up, whether it was an infill development within the old town or whether it's new development on the fringe. We don't have the capacity, and that's what started the infrastructure work in the first place, to support new housing. But we're trying to make sure that the developers pay their fair share. And basically the way it works is that if we wait until the houses are built, and whether the houses happen next year, 5 years from now, or later, if we wait till the houses come and we build the infrastructure then we will have to pay 100% of the growth. But if we build the infrastructure and build the infrastructure plan, assuming that growth is coming and we calculate that into it, we can have growth. And we did the background study with our Watson consultants a couple of years ago, and it was determined that 75% of the costs can be attributed to growth, which means that those new homeowners who buy will be, the developer will be paying a price related to the type of unit it is and the type of home it is, and that's what helps us support the overall costs. The 25% has to come from the rate base because there's a community benefit to having infrastructure over the long term, but by far in Wellington, the majority of that benefit will be for the new people who move to this community over time, not the existing. And that's why the math works, to try and build an infrastructure plan for the long term now. And then we're also looking at it in a regional context. So we are doing a Picton master servicing plan. We are doing a regional service plan because we are trying to optimize the moment we're in. Before we finalize design of new plants, we want to make sure that you don't lose an opportunity to save money on the overall system, because the Wellington ratepayers don't pay just Wellington's cost. The water rates are across the county. We don't have area-specific rates. We have county-wide rates, which means all the people who are hooked up to water pay those rates. And so it's in the interest of all of those ratepayers if we can lower the cost for the whole system. So the regional study is looking at, are there any efficiencies in all these little water systems that exist across the county? Are there efficiencies we could capitalize on now before we build these plants in Wellington that we might want to look at? And similarly, there's a lot of growth planned and currently underway in Picton. And just like in Wellington, where that 75-25 split happened, we haven't done the full master servicing work in Picton, but we're going to see that a large percentage of the new infrastructure needed there will also be to support new growth. So now's the time to capitalize on that, so that that new growth is paying for the lion's share of the cost, not the existing ratepayers. And so those are the overarching principles that we try to bring to all of the studies and work that we've been doing to date. Next slide. And there has been a fair bit that has gone on, and I think I think the best way to approach this is we're trying to slow down tonight to explain how did we get here, what decisions have been made, what decisions are yet to be made, and walk through the assumptions and try to answer some questions so that more people understand what is the plan, why is that the plan, what was the plan based on, and what are all the different pieces of it. But this really starts in 1980 when the Wellington Secondary Plan was created, and then in 2015 when it was updated, that expands the area that can be built out with houses. That changed in 2015. So that becomes a point at which we, as a community, really needed to start to think about infrastructure to service growth over the long term. And there's been a lot of different pieces along the way, and we're going to talk through some of this either in this presentation or through the questions. I'm sure we'll do a deeper dive. But I want to say that there has been numerous points of public consultation, meetings in front of council, decisions at budgets. There's been a lot of conversation as we go. That does not in any way mean that if you are feeling today that you want a different way to be consulted and you want to engage in a different way, which clearly we're hearing from the community overall, we hear that, we understand that. Staff have done what they were asked to do, and there has been a process and an engagement through this. It's been a little bumpy with the pandemic. I know, I had to cajole a few directors into what was like a video TV show in front of no audience about water, wastewater as a way to try and get some information out. But we know that wasn't ideal during the pandemic, and decisions got made at council meetings that were over Zoom, and people want a different way to engage. Those who've been following council might realize that on Tuesday night, council approved their strategic plan, which will set out the strategic priorities and objectives for this term of council. And many of them relate to how we communicate, how we engage, and how we work with the community. And I think that there's some, hopefully you will see that as responsiveness to the feeling that many of you probably have, that you want to be in a different kind of conversation with the municipality about the major infrastructure and financial decisions that are happening. But tonight is really an attempt to slow things down a bit, help people understand how we got here, what is it based on, and try and explain some of these elements in plainer language. The room at the end, the Rotary Room, will remain open for the rest of the evening. And so if you don't find this conversation terribly engaging and you'd rather have a more detailed one, there is staff and others in the room who can answer lots of detailed questions if that's where you want to go. But we're going to try to keep this conversation at the level that is plain enough that everyone can understand and get their questions answered. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Michaud.
Thank you, Marcia. This particular slide is the land use plan for the current secondary plan for Wellington. Now, the secondary plan is basically a very specific official plan for that particular community, and it needs to be in conformity with the overall official plan for the county. At this present time, it's not in conformity with the existing official plan that was approved in 2021 by council at the time. So we will be undertaking a review of this particular plan starting hopefully in this fall, and it'll last approximately 6 to 8, 12 months, depending on how quickly we can get it all together. There'll be a staff-led initiative as opposed to a consultant-led initiative. There'll be lots of public consultation, and stay tuned for that. Nonetheless, the plan does show the current boundary for the municipality, the village. And the official plan, or the secondary plan here, basically is how you manage and deal with your growth or how you're going to deal with land development as it takes place within your community. And under the Planning Act, eventually, at full build-out, all of this community will be serviced by water and wastewater. Doesn't mean it has to be done today. We do have to plan in 3, 10, and 25-year chunks of time. And that then is facilitated through our master servicing plans that are underway at this point in time. So that the next slide, in the census years 2016 to 2021, we saw approximately 4% growth within the community. And we saw even greater growth between 2021 and 2022 with the number of building permits. Here we averaged about 84 between 2016 and 2021. I know the last couple of years we've been over 100, and I think one year we were at 122. So we are on the upward trend for development. And that's when we made the decision to work with our other community partners, being Hastings, Belleville, and Quinte West. We undertook a population study with Watson's, sort of leading the charge for us, to try and determine what's going on in our communities, and specifically within Prince Edward County. And that's what the chart sort of shows you, that if we did a high growth scenario where we're at about 2.4% growth over the next 25 years, then we're looking at that red line that brings us to about 49,000 as a population. If we have a sort of a medium growth scenario over the 25 years, so about 1%, that brings us to 34,700 as a population. And then if we have a very low growth, say, the economy really tanks over that 25-year period, and looking at a 0.4% growth, then we're down around 29,000 for our population. So that's how it kind of got structured in terms of how we looked at the numbers. But when Watson looked at those numbers, the analysis looked at regional and provincial growth drivers, demographics and economics. And what they found is that, and I think it's no surprise, we have a lot of federal immigration, one, but we're also getting a lot of net migration from our other municipalities within a couple hours distance drive from us. So Toronto, Barrie, Ottawa, those communities there. We're getting a lot of people moving in from those communities that we've never gotten before. So that's why we have some of these elevated numbers, and we think that over the years we'll continue to have an elevated growth component to the community. And the other thing that's sort of changed everybody's world, and that through the pandemic, there's a lot more opportunities to work from home or have some sort of hybrid model. As we upgrade our internet services, this will help facilitate that growth. So all of these things sort of work together to bring us into a more elevated level of growth that we're sort of seeing from our development community, who then come and talk to ourselves as staff and are looking for development opportunities.
All right, so as Marcia already mentioned, is this mic on?
Try again.
Test, there we are. So Marcia already mentioned a little bit about the former master servicing plan that was started in 2019 and completed in 2021. So the whole purpose of that master servicing plan was to identify basically a problem statement, identify the deficiencies within the infrastructure system, evaluate different options, and then develop a priority list of infrastructure projects. So those projects that we are now seeing come to fruition, the big obvious one just outside our door here is the new water tower. Coming soon are the trunk mains to complement this. The EQ tank, which is being built right now, which is EQ, short for equalization tank, which provides a bit of a buffer between peak flows and steady flows into the wastewater treatment plant. And of course, that plan developed out of those alternatives. These were the preferred options. So currently, as Marcia mentioned as well, there is a regional water study. And as mentioned in the previous slide about the plants themselves, the the regional is a study that looks at the 6 different systems that we have. So 6 different water systems in a what I'll call a small municipality is an awful lot to handle. It's a very I'll call it, you know, awkward for a small municipality to undertake with approximately 6,500 rate payers on that system. So the idea for this study was to look at some level of optimization. What kind of efficiencies can there be? Look at each individual plant to see, you know, are there opportunities to join it with other systems? So this is still ongoing. We've had one information session on that, consultation session, and there's still another one to come this fall. So just to give an example of one that seems to make some sense is Wellington, being where it is on Lake Ontario, has an incredible, probably the best source of water anywhere in the Quinte region. Picton, as we know, we are doing a Picton Master Servicing Plan right now, and that is going to go through the same process that we went through with Wellington starting in 2019. And one of the things there we have to look at is the Picton water treatment plant there is very, very old, needs to be replaced, very, very outdated with its technology. And so we're looking at an opportunity there to have Wellington be the source of water for Picton, and then the 2 towns basically get connected together by a big water main. So it's that in that sense, we're consolidating our operations within one bigger plant rather than having 2 separate plants. And it's you know, as everyone in the room can appreciate, that's a more affordable way to deal with things. So that's about it in terms of that. The next section is talks about development charges and how we pay for the infrastructure.
It's over to me. So traditionally, the county started collecting development charges countywide for other services, like services related to a highway, fire services, indoor and outdoor recreation, and studies, long-term care, and parking. They did not adopt a DC in the county for water wastewater services. What they adopted was a charge under the Municipal Act, which is called a capital connection charge. So it's a completely different framework. And when we went down this path to finance this infrastructure, in order to have growth pay for growth, we needed to adopt an area-specific development charge, which replaces the connection charge for this service area. And that allowed us more rigor around those front-ending financing agreements. So with that said, we have started to collect from infill on the area-specific. In 2022, we received approximately 24.9. Year-to-date this year, we're just over 230,000. For water services and for wastewater services, we collected 8,000 last year, and we're at 136.2 this year. So it is going to work. It will pay for the debt portion of the growth-related costs over a period of time. And so this model was built into the 2021 rate study. So there is no impact from these decisions at this time that is going to negatively impact your water rates. Again, at this time, they are on cycles, okay?
How long does this time last? That's right.
Okay. So the current DC in effect for Wellington is in under the framework before January 1st, 2022. So there is no impact from the phase-in from Bill 23, which I know was another question floating around how that was going to impact. It will not unless we were to open the DC before it's set to be open, which is on a 5-year cycle for that area-specific development charge.
So
5 years.
Maybe I'll just, sorry. I'm just going to try and add a little bit of context here. So what Amanda is saying is that we build, every 5 years we look at the rate plan, but the rate plan doesn't just look at 5 years. It looks out at your multi-year life cycle of the assets that you are trying to pay for. And so in the last rate study, It took in the assumption that we would be building new plants, a water main, a water tower, all the things that Peter spoke of. It assumed that that was in it. It also assumes that there'll be some growth coming on during that life cycle of those assets, which would create more people to pay, so more ratepayers factored in over time. What we would do then when we look at the next rate study is you test the assumptions and say, you know, did it assume that the new ratepayers would come on faster than they are coming on, or did the prices go change at all in terms of what was assumed? So it is built into the model, but you double check the model every 5 years to see if anything needs to be adjusted. And going back to the first principle about keeping rates steady or looking for ways to decrease it, that is where we look to other elements in the system, other kinds of continuous improvements, and look for other ways we can save funds. The Belleville our arbitration that we went through over the price of water was one of those corrections. We wanted to make sure that seemed like a place where we were losing money unnecessarily, so we fought really hard and won a victory that will give us over 10 years, $1 million to put back into the model of what the rates cost. So we are looking always on a whole bunch of different fronts how to keep the rate stable, but the development that is yet to be built, the water tower that has just been constructed, that is already built into the assumptions. So there's moving forward with this plan doesn't automatically add to the rates because it's already factored into the rates you're paying today. Go ahead.
So the upfront financing agreements have seen us, I'm not going to read off the slide, I think everybody in the room can read the bullet points, but the premise here is that we have received or secured $4.4 million in letters of credit. The developer will pay the DCs when at the draft subdivision approval stage, which I believe we are very, very close to, which we'll see around 11 million for the first phase in development charges. So the DCs that were on the previous page have been indexed accordingly, and those are the current rates that would be charged. Yeah. So receiving those development charges up front will allow us to finance the debt costs incurred. And I know another question out there is, what debt have we incurred related to the projects in the Wellington MSP? We have not incurred any debt. We have incurred costs, but I've not undertaken a debenture yet. We will undertake a construction loan and wait out the rates to see when the rates start to fall on the interest rates before we were to debenture.
Are you done? Okay. All right. So I kind of jumped ahead with my helpful answer, so it's a little bit of the same content here, so I won't go over it. But we set the rates every 5 years. We are double checking the math behind the analysis of the rates, and that is a way to reset and move forward. And it's also a way to make policy decisions. So for example, the last time the rates were set, staff recommended and council supported higher rates in the summer for water to try to recoup the cost of those, trying to encourage conservation in the summer, but also recognize that the tourism industry and all the STAs we have in the community do use more water. We see elevated water use, so that was one of the policy options we put into the rates, and that was a change in the way rates are calculated, and so there's an opportunity to make policy changes in terms of how the rates are paid, but that gets done every 5 years. So our current rate schedule, we are moving to do a background study so that we can have the next 5 years in place. And at the budget of 2023, when this new council came on, they passed a motion asking us to set up a working group of ratepayers that would be involved in the background work. So not just consulting with the community as we develop the piece, but work with a committee that would influence and be a part of it from the beginning. So the terms of reference for the Water and Wastewater Rates Community Working Group is coming to council in September. I believe it's coming to the first committee of the whole in September. And then that'll be a discussion for council, and should the terms of reference be passed or passed in some form, then the clerk's office would begin a recruitment process to find candidates to join that working group. And I expect it'll probably be about a good year's worth of conversations. We've got lots of different areas that we would like to talk with that group about, where we think that there are some possible savings or some issues that could be looked at to stabilize rates, and that's kind of outlined in the terms of reference that'll come before council. So that is going to be the process that we're proposing at the request of council in terms of how we would build the next rate, the rates for the next rate study. The last thing I want to highlight, and this is a question we get a lot in terms of, people are concerned, and rightly so, about rates increasing. And I'm trying to signal and emphasize here that all of us, it's very top of mind to keep rates stable. That is why we plan for infrastructure. It's not having made long-term decisions in the past in this community has hurt us, that it has made it more difficult, but I think that we've done tremendous work in the last 5 years to rectify some of that and plan better for the future so that we can keep costs in check. But there are significant capital costs to maintain even without growth. So there is some we talk about how you can't hook up anything. So if there was an apartment building that was built on Main Street tomorrow, we could not attach it to the system because we've hit the capacity of what the plant can handle, and in a peak situation. So we have to build something to deal with the current situation, and we have council approved growth and that needs to be serviced as well. So as I said at the beginning, if we build now and plan now, we can have developers pay for this growth to the tune of 75% of the total cost, which is, frankly, it's unaffordable for this community to do it any other way. And if we wait, we will end up paying the full cost of what new plants would be required. Because even if growth wasn't coming, even if you could pretend that we were never going to grow, and those decisions have already happened, so we can't turn back that clock, but even if you could, there still is tremendous infrastructure that has to happen when plants get to their natural life cycle. So there is a need to move forward. The question of how fast and when is really being driven by what makes the best financial sense to the ratepayers, and that is the biggest driver for the timeline that we're on right now. I'm going to turn it back to the mayor, who I think is going to field some questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Marcia, and thank you to staff members for the explanations and walking the public through that. As Marcia mentioned, the display boards are available in the back. There are additional staff people that can walk you through those. I also want to introduce the members of council who are here. There are some that are out in the audience. Bill Roberts from Sophiasburg is here. Over here we've got Councillor Roy Pennell, Corey Engelsdorfer, who everybody in the room I'm sure knows and loves, Sam Grasso from Ameliasburg, John Hirsch from South Marysburg, Janice Maynard from Ameliasburg, and Phil St. Jean. And I think out there we've got Chris Brainey, and I think that's about it. So we'll proceed now to questions from the floor. A couple of things. We've got one mic here, and I would ask that if you do have a question, just come to the microphone. We also, for anybody that may not be physically able to come to the mic, we do have what we're referring to as a roving mic, and we will bring the mic to you. You just have to see a hand, and we'll make that happen. So when you come to the mic and you have a question, if you could please state your name, so we know who the staff members or consultants are talking to. And if we don't know how many people are going to have questions, but we'd like to avoid redundancies. And this is an opportunity to ask questions and get clarification from the staff members and the consultants. So would appreciate the questions be as succinct so we can get as many done as possible. Lastly, I'd ask that everyone, and I don't think I have to say this, but I will, is that everybody be respectful, please, and allow the person you're asking the question to respond, and then, in an appropriate way. So we will start this off, and we've got some people who have lined up. So if you could just state your name and who you are directing the question to, that would be terrific.
Good evening. I'm Andy McKenzie. I live in Wellington. I actually have two questions. The first one, the population estimates, did it include anything where people decide not to come here because they're paying $400 and $500 a month for water? Is that factored into it? And also on that, how many people are leaving because we're having to pay $400 and $500 a month for water?
Okay. So is that to
Your estimates for the
Marcia
future,
or the
future growth, did it factor that in?
Okay.
So I'm going to just start an answer, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to explain how the projections were done. But I just want to say, I get that the water rates, we all understand the water rates are high. You want to know why the water rates are high? Because we have a water system that we inherited through amalgamation of 6 separate systems and not enough people to pay for it. So we are looking at ways to reduce those costs by trying to find efficiencies and a better model for delivering the system. So if we could cut water rates, we absolutely would. But right now, most of our rate budget is paying for debt because we have historically not properly planned for the infrastructure we needed. So we're paying for debt for the old infrastructure, and we are planning for the new infrastructure. We are trying to do this in a better way because it isn't sustainable to have water rates that high. We completely get that. And that is what good infrastructure planning should do, is you plan for things so that you can match your planning, your infrastructure, and your finance together. So I understand you're frustrated, but I just want you to know that is why we spend all this time on this work to begin with. But I'll ask Jamie to speak to where the projections come from.
Thanks, Marcia. So it's obviously a complicated topic, and I will be the first to admit that it's not easy projecting growth out 25, 30 years. So in order to try to do this in the most accurate way we can, we look at this from a very comprehensive perspective. We look first regionally, and we look at the trends that are happening within Eastern Ontario and beyond, and then we start to drill down into the economic region, and then ultimately to the county, and we keep drilling down. And so we're looking at what's happening overall with respect to economic growth, labor force trends, and then ultimately examining migration patterns, trends in fertility and mortality. I know those are complicated things that aren't getting to your question, but I just want to start to just give you some idea of how the projections are looked at. When it comes to competitiveness and when it comes to things like rates, we don't get into a specific assessment of how each one of those things is going to affect net migration or population trends, but we have looked at significant drivers, and one of them is the cost of housing. So that's really the key area that we've looked at, and how that's impacting housing rates and outward growth pressure from other parts of the province, and also how it's affecting the types of housing that ultimately will be demanded in terms of low density housing, ownership housing, rental housing. So those are the key factors that go in to try and understand the housing and the population. We look also at who's coming in and who's leaving. So we do look at where's the migration coming from in terms of immigration or net in migration, and then where is it leaving. And we also look at the age structure. So what age groups are coming in and what age groups are coming out. So all those things are factored in, but we can't get into every single...
Based on history.
Well, we look at history, but we also look at trends, and we look at the broader trends that we see that are happening more regionally and provincially as well.
Okay.
All right. This also probably falls in the same category, but if we're paying 25% instead of 100%, is that factored into what we're paying now? The split.
Yes, it is. It built into the model that was adopted in the 2021 rate study.
And the population is based on everybody in the county, even if they're on wells or just on the system?
Just those that are on the service systems.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Sir.
Hi, everyone. I'm Evan Nash. What if the next person's shorter, though? There's municipal planning at work right there. So the next person in line is quite a bit shorter than me, but we didn't think about that. I digress. You're going to hear a lot of people complain about what this is going to cost them, and the economy maybe not being what we thought it was going to be, and the hordes of people not coming here like we thought they were going to. And I'm not going to get into that. The gentleman from Watson's, you did a commercial needs study that coincides with this. What was your recommendation for commercial requirement for development that you see coming?
I didn't specifically do a commercial needs study. I'm not sure what the study you're referring to is.
So there's a Watson's study that has told us that we're going to need, I'm going to round up, just shy of 1 million square feet of commercial space. And that 1 million square feet is going to help fund this water plant. How many Costco's would that be? 4, 5? Belleville's got 56,000 people. It took them 2 decades to get a Costco. But it's coming. So you can go to that one instead of shopping with me. It's fine. Michael, how many people in this room that you talked to wanted box stores put all around their town? Is there anyone here? No. So are we going to have 80,000 cafes that are going to make that 1 million square feet of commercial space? Or what's the through line there? And so my question's actually got nothing to do with any of this. We just got done raising money for the food bank to get backpacks for the kids. We're going to start on raising money for Christmas. Christmas is coming. We're going to do the hampers and stuff. Should I take some of that money that I'm going to raise and use it to fund a study that'll peer review the study that you have that says that we need 1 million square feet of commercial space to make this all work? Or can I keep giving the food bank money? Which one do you want? Because I'll take $20 a head off every person here if I need to, and we'll start. We've got a quote for $10,000 to do the peer review. We have at the Wellington Community Association, which is a really great new organization in Wellington that is trying to push for really good quality development, because again, I don't think anybody here doesn't want development. We know we need it. We want this all to happen, but we want good quality development, and this town deserves it, right? We've put in the work. We deserve good quality development. So do you want, at our group, we have somebody who's very qualified to do this sort of thing. She did the study herself and came up with 250,000 square feet of commercial space needed to sort of support all this growth. It kind of seems like you've made a study that says what you want it to say to justify spending the money. And we don't even know how much money you want to spend because you haven't given us a number yet, have you?
Okay.
We haven't heard a number yet today at all.
Okay.
So I would just
hang on,
ask you to
Evan.
be respectful that we are spending our time to try and answer the questions, and
Come on. Please.
I will answer the question, but when the
Please.
monologue is finished. So what I want
All right.
I want to try and answer your question. So the commercial element, Watson did that study based on, and it wasn't Jamie, it was a different arm of Watson that did the background study for the development charges. And the number is large. It was part of what was discussed at council because it did seem out of step at the time. It was based on the trend we have in the county where 80 to 90% of our taxes come from the residential side, not from commercial or industrial. We just don't see that development as much. So that was factored in. It's looking at a regional or a secondary plan that, as Mike Michaud pointed out, is out of date and needs to be updated. So the development charge study is the information we have at that moment in time. We are looking at updating the secondary plan, which will provide some information. There's a market study that Caitlin has to do as part of their application that we are peer reviewing to test that out. And there'll be a discussion within the community about what kind of commercial really what does that really look like, and how do we see that taking shape? And it is very common for development charges to be revisited over time. So that was the background study to establish something at first, and we can, with new information, reopen and look at that. But we, in the secondary plan, it's just blocks of areas of where commercial. It was not a real thing to people until we start talking about real homes getting built and real growth actually happening. So as that becomes more clear and the more detailed studies get done by developers and they get peer reviewed, then we can and we build out a more accurate version of the secondary plan for what's actually happening in Wellington and the market. We can look at the secondary, or we look at the development charge background study and see if that has to be revisited. So it's so that's where we are. I mean, we don't have the consultant here today who did that, but he did present in front of council when the background study came forward, and those questions were part of that conversation.
Okay.
Because I wasn't sure what study you're referring to, because we didn't do a commercial needs study, but we did a development charge study, and as Marcia pointed out, I wasn't the author of that study. But I can tell you that I oversee all the growth forecasts in those development charges for all the work that's done in our firm. And the general principles that go into developing that square footage assessment starts with looking at the relationship between employment and population. So how many retail jobs do you typically need per population? And it's not just retail, we're talking about office, we're talking about other non-office, non-commercial type uses that would fall into that broader category. And then from there, we apply a floor space per worker assumption to get the amount of square footage. There's nothing that I can see from that work that's, in my opinion, out of step or out of line. I'd be happy to see what what a peer review might, we'd be happy to look at another opinion on that. But from all the work that I've done across the province, there's nothing that really stands out to me as being abnormal. And we've also looked at the impacts of e-commerce and how that's impacting need for retail space and floor space. So all those things have been factored in, and I don't think, based on the amount of population growth, that they're really that out of step.
So you still haven't given us a number, and I'm the one monologuing, but you haven't actually told us the number of what you want to spend on this, and you can't tell me how much commercial space you're going to need. You think it's 1 million square feet? And what does that do to the economy here? Also, is there a lot of office workers here? Does anybody act like everybody goes to Belleville to shop? Like, what have we factored in all those things? Like, How do we get these numbers? Like, it feels like you're basing these numbers that you have on studies that tell you what you want to hear, not what the actual facts are.
Okay, question?
So my question is, do I need to peer review this? Should I start raising money to peer review your work?
Okay.
Yeah? Okay, we're collecting $20 a head at the back door.
All right. Thank you. Okay, Elaine. Elaine, it looks like you need, oh, there you go.
I think I can manage. Okay, what
Great
question
thing.
do I want to ask after that? I'm not sure. But I guess the overriding one in my mind is that none of this seems to take into account what our country has been through in the past few years. We've come through a pandemic. We've come through a situation in which the Bank of Canada raised interest rates very quickly about 6 months ago, and we all watched the housing market die just almost overnight. I guess in my mind the question is, what if they don't come? What if they don't build?
Okay.
And the other part of that, there's two other parts to that that I will put out there for you. I think that the people who pay the water bills are completely left out of the decision making. We need a water commission in this county that includes councillors who pay water bills and residents who pay water bills, and to hell with the ones who don't.
Right.
And my third question is, being a resident of Wellington on the lake, I look at the construction that's going on down on the lake at the sewage area, and I haven't got a clue what's happening. Nobody seems to talk about it. We have very little information about what is being built, why it's being built, and what's supposed to be built next, and I'd like some answers.
Okay. All right, who'd like to take this one on? Dave? Go ahead.
So the project that is going on at the sewage treatment plant is an equalization tank. What that does is it allows, we have a lot of I&I, which is infiltration and inflow when we have storm events. And this tank will allow a storage option. So when we get those high flows, that the sewage is put to the sewage treatment plant in a way that it can be handled, that will allow, once completed, some additional capacity to be opened up for possible development, infill development in the future. So that's the project that's going on at the the wastewater plant.
Is it part of an expansion that's all connected to this increase in population?
The EQ tank, the equalization tank, is a interim solution that was identified in the 2021 master plan, and it is being built that it could be added on to an addition or when the wastewater plant is replaced in the future. So it's a component, it's the first component that could be included into the final build of the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, so it's not a wasted thing, it's not something that's going to become obsolete
No.
with the next stage of things.
No, that's the whole idea of we're looking at the long-term planning. So even the stuff that we're doing in the interim is going to be a component in the future.
Okay, because I don't see much of anything on the information boards about that. Maybe I'm just not seeing it, but
On the municipal website, we have a project page that
I'm
has,
talking about the boards that you keep putting out for people to look at. I can't find that information. I'm looking for it and I can't find it.
so that is, that was part of the 2021 master plan. That was when the public engagement happened on that. But as we are in the construction phase, we do have a municipal on our municipal projects on our website, there is a page dedicated to that project that has the information of the project managers that are looking after that, the contact information. So if you'd like detailed information on that, please reach out to us and we will we'll answer all the questions you have.
Thank you.
Now, the other questions related to the Water Commission, I think Marcia has responded that that's coming forward in, I think, the first committee of the whole meeting in September.
Yeah, to be clear, that's not what council asked for. It's not a commission, it's a working group to, a committee to inform the water rates. What you're talking about is a governance change, and that's not what council will be considering in September, but what council would be considering is what they asked us to do, set up a committee that would inform how we create the next background study for the rates.
But why not a commission? It seems to me that that's a fairly common occurrence throughout our province. Why can't we have something similar here?
Marcia, can you respond to that?
I don't know so much about municipal commissions or a commission board, but I do know that I have seen throughout the province where they are set up as a municipal services corporation, much like our Affordable Housing Corporation. They act independently from the municipality in that their debts are not the debt of the municipality. So I have seen that model, but I've not seen separate commissions per se.
Well, I think
No.
maybe both of us have to go to Google.
Well, Elaine, this is coming forward in September, and
Okay,
the point, the point about the composition of that group is well taken, but it being comprised of people that are actually users of the system.
I just think that that group needs to actually have some kind of power as well, and not just be a sideshow. I don't know. I don't know how else to put it.
Okay.
So you have answered two of my questions. The biggest one that I think everybody in the room is worried about is, what if they don't come?
Right. Okay.
I can speak to that. I mean, those are really good questions in terms of what's happening right now with the current economic environment, and nobody has a crystal ball. And this is something that I monitor on a regular basis. I dedicate my career to trying to understand this, and I think trying to figure out the short-term fluctuations in the economy is really quite difficult. You can listen to every podcast or any interview out there by an economist, and no one really knows exactly if we're going to have a hard landing, a soft landing. But what I can tell you is that I think we're in a period now, what COVID's done is it's really, in my opinion, created a higher level of economic volatility. We saw a low-rate environment for years, and obviously there's a lot of impact that's had on borrowing and asset prices. And now we're seeing the sharpest increase we've seen in rates in 40 years. And obviously there's lag effects that are being felt on that, and that haven't even set into the market yet. So there's no doubt that the market's cooling, and it's going to struggle through the next 18 months or 2 years, in my opinion, with respect to this rate cycle. And then we're going to have another impact where we'll have an issue where rates need to come down, and then there's going to be a surge of more economic activity in the real estate market. I predict that's likely what you're going to see. No one can be sure. But what we're really trying to focus on is not trying to understand every inflection point in the growth rates in the next year or two. We're trying to plan for the next 15 to 25 years, because that's the amount of time it takes to ultimately have this discussion to seeing an occupied home in your county. And so we have to plan over the long term, and the long-term trends are very positive. The structural aspects of the economy have improved significantly over the last decade, and over the long term, they appear they're going to continue to be positive. And we have the highest rate of immigration of any G7 country. We're the fastest growing developed country by far across any other G7 countries. And so we expect we're going to continue to see more growth. We're going to have to course correct, I'm sure, because I'm never going to get it perfectly right. It's impossible to project over the next 25 years and be bang on. But we're trying our best to be as accurate as we can by being as comprehensive as we can. And over the next few years, we're going to continue to monitor this. And I think that's a really important aspect, monitoring and phasing. And then at some point, we're going to have to reopen this up again when we get new data. And we're going to have to take a look at those projections again. And that's the cycle that we're going to go through.
With all due respect, sir, I would say to you that the majority of the people in this room won't be here in 25 years.
Yeah.
And secondly, when you talk about immigration and so on, those are not the people who come to live in Prince Edward County. Immigrants typically wish to live in the big cities, in the heart of those big cities, not in a place like the county. But at any rate, thank you for your answer, but it really doesn't cut it with me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay, but there we go. Hi, my name is Carol Mannheim. My husband Pete and I moved to Wellington, I think in 2011. We own our home. At the time we moved, we still owned 2 houses in Atlanta, which is where I am from. I am an immigrant to the county and to Canada. I love it. But you know what? It is scary, this not coming thing. And this is not the question I was planning to ask. But after hearing you talk, Marcia, I have some questions here because, and you know, there's so much tension here in this room. And it's very scary being up here. And I don't want to sound mean, and I don't want to be very adversarial. But there's a sense that we don't get told a lot of stuff until it's happening. And there's not a lot of transparency, we feel. And it's not just me. I mean, I talk to people, and I think there's a sense of there's not enough transparency before things are approved. And then that makes us feel like us and them, you know, and that we're against each other, and we're not. We're all working together to improve what we have here. And there's a lot of problems in this county, and a lot of people don't want to move out here because we don't have public transportation. We don't have doctors. We don't have food delivery like they do over in Quebec. And I lived in England for a bunch of years, and I mean, that's important, and as I get older, I really miss that. So we are not Toronto.
Nope.
And I think that a lot of the people that want to live here, who know what this county is and like it for what it is, are not being able to stay because the prices of everything went crazy. But I'm also old enough to remember the last time we had a big swing, 2008, started in the States. It was still going on when I started looking for a house in 2010 here, and the realtors telling me, oh, it hadn't happened here. What's happening down there didn't happen to us. But those houses were sitting on the market for a year. The one I bought had been on the market for well over a year. And are they going to really come, and the numbers that you're talking about, and are they going to be building houses that people down here want to live in? We don't need 3-story buildings that are great for lots and lots of people to come in for a big holiday home. We're older here, or we're younger, you know, and so some of that planning is something. But something got said, you said here, Marcia, that if we were to build something tomorrow to address housing shortages, we couldn't hook them up. Well, 3 months ago, Caitlin was approved to build that apartment building. They got a challenge to it because they moved it last minute to a different spot on their plot, and they had to stop, and then they've decided they're not going to build anytime soon, and I'm not surprised because I watched this in Atlanta. Anybody that was fool enough to start building a house in this kind of economy lost their shirts because it takes years for it to come back. And yet, what about the building that's supposed to go in over there where the old arena was? We tore it down, and they're ready to build something else. Are you going to tell us that we can't hook them up to water? Because you're just saying there's no water, they couldn't be hooked up. I don't believe you. I just think that sounds good, but I don't believe you. So I hope, I would like to see a little more transparency. I would like to know, I don't think I want to say anything more because I think I'm being very adversarial. But there is an issue here going on that all of you, the Shire Hall people, the staff people, planners, I don't think you're really communicating. You're leaving us out of the loop early on. And I know, talking to Mike Michaud, you have things that you want to see done, like the size of sidewalks and making things accessible and having curvy roads through the thing. I mean, the plans you want to see happen, I agree with. But I know that you're having a hard time getting those things to really happen. So, because the people who are coming in here that are going to try to, and there is a sense that if we put all this infrastructure in, who are we really building it for? Are we building it for Caitlin Corporation? And then they don't want to put in anything that's going to really bless. I could see it causing Wellington to become a ghost town downtown if you put a big strip mall up here. And in a way, I'd kind of like to have a pool up there. I'd like to have a bigger grocery store maybe, but not at the cost of what it's going to do. So.
Okay, I think thank you for your comments, and I think the point of transparency is well taken, and making sure that the public is involved in, and you know, as we go out for information gathering, and it is nobody's intention to not do that. So we obviously have to do a better job. But I think interesting observation. I was talking to somebody, and this relates somewhat to your comment about will they come. I spend on Saturday mornings I come to the Wellington markets, the Eddy Market. Sunday morning I go to the Picton Market. And they're interesting environments to walk around, particularly during the summer, because there's a mix of certainly visitors, and visitors are pretty easy to spot because they're all looking at their phone at maps and stuff like that. And the local people are talking to the merchants and to their friends and stuff. But what's very interesting is see the composition of the people that are in those environments during the summer. The number of little kids, young families that have moved into Prince Edward County in the past 3 or 4 years, I think is very noticeable and very, very encouraging. I don't have specific numbers, but last Sunday in Picton, I spoke to several of them who were pushing strollers and kids, and they moved here they didn't move here for the big box stores. They didn't move here for food delivery. They moved here because of what we as a community offer and all the things that we believe in. And our job and intention is to maintain those principles and respect all the reasons that many of us moved here. But as I say, I don't have numbers, but it is very noticeable as you wander around those environments. I'll let you, is there any response?
I want to respond to the point about not being able to connect. So there are projects that have already been approved that are part of the connection plan. What I meant was that there's no new projects. So the Wellington Arena project is part of the last of the remaining capacity we had, and that project is moving forward, and Peter can talk about others, but we are at the end of what new development in the core could connect to. So it's I wasn't clear on that statement.
Mr. Mooney.
Yeah. My name's Gary Mooney, and as some of you may be aware, I pay a lot of attention to what's going on with the municipality. And I must admit, all of this stuff slipped by me over the last 3 years or so. I don't know if that's my fault or the municipality's fault, but I suspect a little of both. But I'm now just getting into this. And the first thing that bothers me is the population projections. The lady two ahead of me said it very well. What if they don't come? Now, I have a half century of doing financial projections, long-term financial projections. The first thing I do is look at what's happened in the past. 60 years ago, we had about 19,000 people. Now we've got 25. The rate of growth has been 0.3% per year for 60 years. And if you look at just the last 10 years, growth has slowed down. It's 0.2%. So what I sort of heard was that the people doing projections have paid close attention to what's happened in the last 5 years, and that growth has been 4% over that period. Now, that's really dangerous to look at too short a period. But I've seen numbers that suggest that Wellington's going to go from 2,000 to 14,000, Picton from 5 to over 30. And, you know, I wonder why this didn't happen in the past. You know, we used to talk about the county being the best kept secret in Ontario. I can give you 12 or 15 reasons why a lot of this growth may well pass us by. And the sense I get is that the projections have been done on a macro basis, looking at Ontario as a whole, looking at the region as a whole, maybe even Belleville. But the county is not Belleville, and there's lots of reasons why Belleville would grow when the county doesn't grow. So this is a very basic problem I have. I just don't believe in the growth. And I worry about what happens if we don't get the growth and the extent to which we'll be on the hook for a lot of cost without the people to pay for it.
Okay. What?
So I guess I have to turn that into a question. The question is, to what extent have you paid close attention to understanding how the county works, why people move here and why they don't move here, why businesses thinking about the county will look at Belleville and they'll go there, not here, because we're not close to the 401, we're not close to a rail line, we don't have the younger population to fill jobs. So to what extent are you really looking at our local situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. You've raised a lot of good points. And again, I would stress that we've looked at this both from a macro perspective and a bottom-up perspective. So and it's important to look at at that geographic context, both broadly and locally, and it's also important to look at that broad time frame. So we've gone back looking at 20 years, and I think a big pivotal point we look at in time is around the 2008, 2009 period, and looking even before that, what was structurally happening with the economy back then. And there was a period from about 2003 to 2010 where we had a really hard time in Eastern Ontario through loss of jobs in the manufacturing sector and export-based sectors. And things started to improve in this part of the world and all throughout Ontario, because I'm working all across the province. So it's again, this is not just a Prince Edward County phenomenon. It's not a Wellington phenomenon. This is something that's happening all over the province, particularly in Southern Ontario. But when we look back at what's been happening since around 2010, 2011, 12, things did start to turn a corner. We started to see, even at that time, more people coming to this part of the region. We started to see improvements in the job market, and we started to see, for the first time in a while, labor force growth. And we continue to see that trend upward. Now, we're going to have, to the woman's comment before, I think we're going to have some periods of fluctuation over the next couple of years, but we have a significant amount of people coming to the country on an annual basis, and we're exceeding those targets. And there's outward growth pressure. So in the last 10 years or so, we've seen a heightened amount of outward growth pressure from the larger urban centers, from the Greater Golden Horseshoe and GTA and Ottawa. And those, even small amounts of population that come from those areas to Prince Edward County have a big impact on the growth, because there's such large areas. And so that's putting a lot of pressure on population growth because of affordability. And you've now got a situation where the regional economy is seeing opportunity, and you've got changes with respect to how we work. So as Mike pointed out, there's more opportunity for work at home, there's more opportunity for hybrid work, but for the first time in a decade, we actually have regional economic growth. And I know there's a lot of concern, and there's fear of growth, and there's externalities of growth, and we all know that, but there's also a balance, because a negative growth situation is also very, very challenging for a municipality from a demographic standpoint, from a labor force standpoint. Like, one of the things that this report points out is even with this high growth rate, the percentage of people who are 65 plus in the population is going to double from 2006 to 2051. That's only going to be even more exacerbated with slower growth. So one of the reasons why you're seeing more pressure on immigration is to directly solve that, or help, I guess, mitigate that challenge with an aging population and aging labor force. And I know that it's not the simple solution to all the problems that we have in this country, but it's the primary driver of this is more people coming in and more outward pressure, and we don't think that's likely going to change. We think we probably hit a peak during the COVID period, but in my opinion, the long-term trajectory has changed, and we're going to keep monitoring it. And if we're off course, we're going to course correct. We're not going to stick with the forecast that's off base if we're starting to be misaligned in terms of how we're growing.
Okay, one last quick question. Did you sit down and meet with people in the county and ask them about growth, why growth might happen, why it might not happen? No, I haven't spoke with individual residents. I have not. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. My name is Wim Kirkhoff. I'm 7 years in Wellington on the Lake. In 1974, I emigrated from the Netherlands to here. And I just want to iterate a little bit about the immigration part. I was told to go to Mississauga. I didn't come by boat, I came by plane. But I had to start in a big city. So I wish they had sent me to the county here. It didn't happen. You have to work your way up or work your way out the big city. Anyway, I have a question. I have to think about the question, what the question was. Anyway, I was reading the Times. On the backside was a blue page with all the myths and facts. And we were talking about the working group. I saw it on the slide over here. And it says it may include citizens, people, ratepayers. What is the answer on that? May. Is it going to be us, or can it be something else?
So I can talk about what the terms of reference that we're going to bring forward to council says. It recommends that it be a small number of councillors. I can't remember if I think it's 2, it says, and the balance of the group being ratepayers who actually live within an area that is serviced by municipal water, and that it not be, so we're proposing, the staff recommendation is that it be a group of citizens, not developers, not others, but people who are citizens who pay the water rates, so that we make sure that that's the perspective. We think that's what council was asking for, so that's what we're proposing. But if the language was ambivalent in that was not our intention. I think we're just respecting that it isn't a thing until council approves it. But we certainly are recommending a committee based on what council asked us to put together that would be, the majority would be residents. And I think we're suggesting that some councillors be on it as a liaison, but I think the room's made it pretty clear which councillors you'd want on it. So that'll probably be part of the discussion too.
Okay, you just want to have that clarification. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Dorothy, can I, before you proceed, there's a gentleman over here who that I believe there's a gentleman over there. So I'll take his question and then come back to you.
Thank you. My name is Harvey Bradshaw. I live on Elmdale Drive in Wellington on the Lake, and I had the opportunity about 6 weeks ago to talk to our illustrious mayor, about some of these concerns that I have about the water rates. And I just want to address, there's an attitude at Shire Hall. And what you said to that gentleman, I'll address your question when the monologue is finished, is Mr. Mayor asked for us to be respectful. Well, respect goes both ways. And for you to say to him, I'll address your question as soon as when the monologue is finished. We pay your income, your salary, young lady. And that's the way I feel about it. I feel very strongly about that. Respect goes both ways. So my question is when we manage a household, and I don't pretend to have all the answers, I think that growing the infrastructure is critically important in any community or in any city. But it has to be affordable. And so my question is how much money do we take in for all the people that are on the water system, and how much money does it cost then on an annual basis to run the water system? Isn't that a reasonable thing to ask?
So you can answer.
How much money comes in and how much money goes out?
Okay.
So
Get a
before
response.
before I turn that over to Amanda, our Director of Finance, I apologize for my comments. As soon as I said it, I regretted it. And you made a comment about that being intimidating, standing up there. This isn't fun here either.
Of course it isn't.
And so I apologize, Evan, and I apologize to the room, but it wasn't appropriate, and you're right. Can you answer the question?
Okay. Amanda?
Well, it's okay. We all make mistakes, but that's an attitude at Shire Hall. I went down there with a $460 water bill. Unfortunately, I had a massive brain hemorrhage about 4 years ago. So before my brain hemorrhage, I did some research, and I was told that we pay the highest water rates in the country, right here in Prince Edward County. What's up with that? So I went down to the Shire Hall with my $460 water bill, and I stood at the glass window and I said, I'd like to talk to the person. I told Mr. Mayor this about 5 weeks ago. I'd like to talk to the young lady, the person that runs the water department. So I went and sat in that office, and I said to her, can you explain to me, please, why I have a $460 water bill? And this was her comment, not far off of what you said to that gentleman. She said to me, Mr. Bradshaw, maybe you have a leak. I don't have a leak. I don't have a leak. Okay, well, did you water your lawn, Mr. Bradshaw? Well, I watered my lawn a little bit, but if you come to my house this afternoon and look at my lawn, it's mostly dead. And by the way, when I look out my front window on Elmdale, there's water as far as I can see. I don't get it. I just simply don't get it. So I think that, you know, that the incomes, I'm not suggesting, I think I think we should be looking at how much money comes in from the people that are on the water system and how much money does it cost to run the water system. And it has to work. And if it doesn't work, if you run a business that way, then you have to close the business. So then we can't afford to do it. Simple to me. I don't know, but it doesn't seem to be that simple. But there's an attitude at Shire Hall, that very attitude. And we're paying the salaries and we're paying the income. So we have a right to know. I've got right here, right now, I brought it with me today. Can you hold that, Rick, please, for a minute? Somebody hold that for me. I don't have I'm 50% paralyzed still. I have a $474.71 water bill that's due today, August 31st. And if I don't pay it today, which I've already paid the damn bill, it was $498.46. So my question is how dare the water department charge a late charge to these people, to me? So I paid the $471 before it was due on August the 31st. So now Mr. Mayor gave me some pat answer when I talked to him 6 weeks ago. Well, you know, Mr. Bradshaw, the water is on a user-based system. I understand that. I'm not stupid. I understand it's a user-based system. However, I had a massive brain hemorrhage, and we use more water than most, so I agree to that. But these rates are still far too high. You know, I retired in March. I was forced to because of my brain hemorrhage. In any event, I contributed to Canada Pension for 45 years in my financial practice. I owned a financial planning practice in the city of Toronto. For 45 years, I contributed to Canada Pension, and this water bill is half my CPP payment that came in on the 28th. So it's half my Canada pension payment that I have to pay for water. Unbelievable. I want to talk about where the rubber hits the road. I don't want to talk about, I'm big, infrastructure is important, but can we afford to do it? On a whim and a prayer. I can't afford these water bills. I've thought, I don't want to sell my house, but with these huge water bills, I've thought about selling.
Okay. Do we have a, Amanda, do you have a response to the question from Mr. Bradshaw?
Yes, annually for water and wastewater, it's approximately 11 million.
So how much comes in from the people on the system? So that's the answer to my question. It costs $11 million to run the system. I get it. So how much comes in from all the people that pay with my $500 due today?
11 million.
So the system is balanced?
It's a balanced budget.
It's a balanced system?
It's a balanced system.
So does any of the money that comes in from water go to other places in Shire Hall to support incomes? So in other words, the money that comes in from the water people pays for the water. And you know, we don't use the water in Wellington, we buy water. And you know why we do that? Because when I turn on my tap in the morning, it smells like chlorine. We buy water every week at Foodland. I don't drink the water here. I don't trust it. And I don't trust that you're saying it won't affect our rates in the future. I don't trust you. Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Bradshaw, I think the clarification to the answer, Amanda?
None of the monies collected through water and wastewater rates goes to anything to support tax services at all. They're two separate systems, two separate accountings altogether.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dorothy.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Dorothy Bothwell. I live in Wellington on the Lake. I'm a former Town of Grimsby councillor and chair of planning for the Town of Grimsby. I spoke Tuesday evening at council at length. In fact, they were gracious enough to give me more time because I had so much to say. I'm hoping not to say so much tonight, but I think there are some key points to make here as well and reiterate that were spoken at the Tuesday meeting as well. I'm willing to share that with anybody in the group who wants to have a copy of that. First of all, I feel sorry for the new advisory committee that's going to be struck with ratepayers on it, because in 2026 they're going to have a very dismal message to have to share with their neighbors in the community. And putting that onus on an advisory committee, to me, rather than a water commission, it's a message that somebody's going to have to bear, and they're going to be the bearers of probably a lot of negative rate issues. When I think Amanda was mentioning about 11 million in, 11 million out for the water and wastewater and income, actually the 2022 audit actually identified a 2 million surplus in water and wastewater and said that 2 million was going to go back into reserves to be used specifically for water and wastewater. So I'm really hopeful that we'll see that somehow affect our rates in 2026 and reduce them. So I'm just going to quickly try to touch on just a couple of the key things here. The whole thing about the water, the 21 water wastewater rate study, was that the 2022-26 rates we pay would be full cost recovery of capital costs to the year 2030 based on a significant increase in ratepayers expected to come online with projected growth. We've heard the story, are they coming? So that was a big assumption. That's what we're paying for based on anticipated growth. It also didn't include the Picton Master Servicing Plan or a Regional Master Servicing Plan. Any of those capital costs are not included in that study or water rates. So yeah, if the decision is to move ahead with a regional water model, then it's another 75 to 100 million, and whatever it is going to be added in 2026. The recent 2022 audit also showed 35.8 million in long-term debt. Of that, 23.4 million is water, wastewater rate-supported debt right now. That was in 2022, December 31st, so there's more debt now. The 2020 to 2023 approved capital projects are not yet debentured, which means they haven't, they're not forecasted into that debt picture, and they went to beg forgiveness from the OLT so that it wouldn't be reflected in the annual repayment levels, so that we can keep our 25% threshold of what we can spend against the amount we get in. But it doesn't matter how you look at those numbers, it's all debt and we've all got to pay it. Us ratepayers that are paying for water. The upfront financing, the deal with developers, one developer, Caitlin. Again, these prepayments will cover the county's debt costs for major infrastructure improvements for at least the next 10 years. Those advance payments, so he gave us $4 million, we can't touch it. We're going to get $11 million at some point. Well, he's only going to build like 370 units in phase 1 or 2, and we can only collect development charges on what he builds. So yeah, we might get them up front at the approved draft plan of subdivision, but we're only going to get a little drop in the bucket. Meanwhile, we're going to put out up front $100 million in infrastructure costs. So depending on whether he builds more than that, that's the first couple of apartment buildings and whatever. So we get a little bit of development charges. But he could also sit on that and wait, because the government just said in Bill 23 that when you do a new development charge bylaw, a developer only has to pay 80% in year 1, 85 in year 2, 90 in year 3, 95, and then 100% in year 5. So a new development charge bylaw, which we have to do in 2026, will be fall into those rules. So if he's smart, the developer sits back and says, okay, maybe I won't build right yet. I'm going to wait till I only have to pay 80% of those development charges. It's going to throw the whole cost model out of who's paying for what, okay? And it's going to put more onus on us as ratepayers. So I'm just concerned that the potential is that developers looking at that and could benefit, or there's delays in the economy and the environment, whatever, and he decides not to build yet. He just has to wait until that's renewed. And it's a 10-year then. So the development charge bylaw at that time is a 10-year, not a 5-year. So we will be looking at something happening in 2026, and it's all going to be, as I say, we don't have a crystal ball. What's the worst case scenario? I know that this council and staff are working very hard, and they said they've inherited a lot of debt and a lot of problems and not a strong asset management plan or not a lot of reserves, and they didn't have development charges till just recently. Maybe that means you got to step back though and say, okay, we'll just, we did this upfront financing agreement with Caitlin, but maybe we'll only do the interim servicing, which is what you've got to date, which is the equalization tank, the trunk lines, the tower. Leave it at that, kind of take what you put out of pocket now and hold it, and you can build what you want. Sit back and look at other mechanisms, government grants, try to restore some reserves, try to look at ways to build some more financial backing before you look at a full build out and doing that full Cadillac. So
Dorothy, are you?
I'm just, thank you, Mayor, I'm almost done. I'm just going to say, like, some of those questions that were put to council on Tuesday night were, this is what we're saying. You've heard, you're hearing from over 640 residents of Wellington on the Lake. Reassess, this upfront agreement, it's not a guarantee that we're going to see those funds. The population growth, it's not a guarantee we're going to see those people coming. You have an opportunity when those reports come back on the Class CAs and they say to you, you build it this way or build it that way. You can look at, what your capital expenditures are to date and say, no, maybe we need to slow down. So we're asking that press pause. We're asking you to slow down, reassess those assumptions, reassess.
Okay. All right.
Reassess that financial risk and commit to continuing to engage with your people in your community and keeping us in the loop as to what you're doing and being transparent moving along in those decision making. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything? Okay. Okay, well, Director of Finance Carter wants to respond.
I just want to clarify that the $2 million is not a surplus from your water and wastewater. There is approximately $600,000 collected in capital connection charges, which flow through that operating statement, which are your growth-related charges collected from the other areas in the municipality on one side, and then on the other side, we collected a little over 600. We collected $450,000 in capital connection charges for water services and $621,000 in wastewater services. So half of that, approximately, went into the reserves. It's not a surplus. It's capital growth connection charges that were collected. And on the other side of that, there were small surpluses, but that is what the rates study was. Those rates were built to put money at the end of the year into those reserves to fund future capital. And that the rates are there for doing their job and working within that framework.
And I just want to point out the question, or the commenter was making the point about Caitlin waiting until 2026. That is why we got the upfront financing agreement, was in part so that the letters of security is so that they cannot wait forever. So we are at a place where as soon as the trunk line goes in, they will have to pay for the development charges for the units that they will be able to build. Right now, we could sign an agreement tomorrow, but we don't have, according to the agreement, it was both sides had to do things. So they had to pay up front and put the securities, and we had to install the infrastructure for them to connect. We don't have a trunk line, so where they would build the homes, there isn't a way to connect to the system, whether it's the interim system or the full system. So once we get the trunk line started to be under construction, then they will pay their DCs for the portion. If they chose to, fold their arms and say we're going to wait, then we would call the mark and we would collect the securities. The agreement does not allow them to sit back and wait. We have a time limit on that, and we've actually exceeded that time limit, but we haven't met our part of the bargain by putting in the trunk line. And the reason we're delayed on that is because the original plan was involved digging up Main Street, Wellington. And after we lived through Picton's Main Street infrastructure, we've figured out a cheaper way to do this with a pumping station, and that is what's going to council for tender, and then we will move forward on implementing it. So we're a little bit slower because we changed the design to find some savings. So they can't just sit and wait till 2006.
Okay, sir.
Hello, excuse me. My name is John Caliendo. I live 3.5 kilometers to the west. Hope you'll indulge me. I'm not a direct stakeholder, but my wife's great aunt is in the Consacon Cemetery, so that kind of qualifies me to speak. And her great-great-grandfather's in Bongard, so are we good? I can go ahead? Yeah.
Yeah, please proceed, John.
I've got a lot of respect for you, Mr. Mayor, and for you and for all of our staff. I wasn't actually going to speak tonight, but in light of that respect, the reason I am speaking tonight is that a few days ago I opened the paper and I saw this ad. And I've been involved in government finance or government. I was on the board of the Ontario Finance Authority. I ran government finance for Solomon Brothers. Every other week I'm involved in government issues in Toronto. I've never seen something so dismissive and condescending and disingenuous and hard to read as this ad. You could have simply done Waterworks FAQs, frequently asked questions, and here are the answers. This was, I think this was really, as I said, I really thought that was incredibly arrogant. I've got a couple of quick questions, a couple of quick points, and then a question. The first one is that the gentleman from Watson, the report was done in 2021, is that correct?
No, the latest work we've done is we've done 2 reports in 2023, and the DC study, I can't remember when it was finalized, if maybe Marcia can help me, or was it, I think it was I can't recall. 21. So we've done a DC study in 21, and then we've done 2 growth analysis studies in 2023.
So when you did your DC studies in 21, we had 1.5% 5-year interest rates, and we had a market that was on fire. We're now where we are. I'm assuming that the county has done some kind of a sensitivity analysis. A few people before me asked that same question. What if you missed your targets? Because I heard the term, the math works. But what I also heard, even though you haven't shown us the math works, what I also heard was in a few years' time, you will pause and reset and then determine whether you got the math right now. That's maybe I'm not being facetious or flippant. That's how I heard it. So it's not like the math works indefinitely. It's not like the CapEx charges that these folks pay on their water bill are going to maintain whatever the system is going forward 20 years. It's going to have to reset. We all agree on that, right?
I think that question is probably more to finance on the charge, but maybe just while I've got the mic on the growth, like typically we look at growth every 5 years because that's when the bulk of the new data comes out with census data, and then in between that there's all sorts of statistics that we follow with intercensal data, permit data, labor force data. So we're constantly monitoring and tracking, but we're going to relook every 5 years when we get new data, and that's typically the way it's done.
Makes perfect sense. I agree with you. By the way, I'm a big believer in infrastructure. When I was on the board of the Ontario Finance Authority, we were involved in launching Infrastructure Ontario. I'm a big believer you have to get ahead of these things. Toronto now is suffering because for 20 years it didn't invest its own infrastructure, and now it is. Having said that, the risk of getting it wrong is what I think all the folks in this room, and you can see 4 or 5, however number of people, that's what the concern is. And the lack of transparency is what the concern is. So those are perfectly legitimate concerns and questions, right? I mean, I don't think anyone can argue against that, because ultimately, if you got it wrong, again, not trying to be offensive, you're the consultant, but if you got it wrong, it falls on them, right? It doesn't fall on you. So my last point, very last point, what's really remarkable living in this county for the last 5 years is that, by the way, I go back and forth from Toronto. My wife lives here full time. That's why we have a great marriage. Get along great, but she's not here tonight. Exactly. That's why she's a smart one. Yeah. There are some really unbelievably qualified people that I've come across. And you have Joe Barrage has a home in the county. I mean, probably the most respected planner in the country. I'm not sure if he's here this evening. There are a number of really respected people. And I didn't realize that Jane Marshall has a house in the county. So Jane Marshall was the executive vice president of Loblaw. She ran all their property portfolio. She's right now on the board of RioCan. I'm sure you've heard of RioCan. She's on the board of Plaza REIT. And she did a quick little peer review of her own. And I'm just going to read you the conclusion. And I know it's been sent to staff, and I think it should be circulated to council. And just reading the conclusion, this brief recommends a separate study on the viability of 927,400 square feet of commercial space built into the economic growth model for Wellington. Using commercial metrics and economic math, there is a significant gap between Watson's 2021 study findings and commercial reality. Even applying the most generous math to commercial growth in Wellington and the greater Peck area, there is no mathematical or commercial reality to support this amount of footage in the next quarter century and beyond. Further, if the residential growth is delayed or slowed due to the lack of absorption employment opportunities, or even current market forces, the Watson estimates are dramatic overstatements of our reality and should not be used for investment purposes. So we're not here to debate this tonight. Okay. However, this is a person who doesn't make their living as a consultant. This is a person who makes their living actually writing the check. They decide where they're going to spend $10 or $20 million building commercial space or $50 million. This is that person. And so this person is suggesting that you go ahead and do a peer review of Watson. And by the way, I'm sure you're not offended because Watson probably does peer reviews of J.C. Williams, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a common practice. So Mr. Mayor and Marcia, coming back to Evan's point, that's what we'd like to put to you, that you folks, at the very least, to give some level of comfort, have a peer review done to see where we are today, not in 2021. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Just one sec. Okay, we're going to, sir, your question, then we're going to take a break.
Okay, thank you.
Not
Good
a long,
evening.
not a long break. A break. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. My name is John White. I live on First Avenue in the shadow of the new water tower. It's great because on a dark night, if I'm driving home, I know exactly where to turn right to get to my home. Sorry, that was a facetious comment. I understand, and I heard at the beginning, the comment that the planning that's taking place, the water tower, what's happening with the filtration unit down by Carla Court, is all predicated on getting ahead of the plan, getting ahead of the game. That's great. That's what a lot of corporations do. I've also heard that we as residents don't have to worry because the developers are going to pay 75% of that. Well, the developer whose name has come up a few times this evening is Caitlin. And I think we all know that Caitlin right now have huge financial and legal challenges. So the guarantees that you have to collect that money from them is fantasy land. So let's assume,
okay.
Let's assume, please, that Caitlin go into bankruptcy. The money isn't there. We never get it. What's plan B for covering 75% of that, whatever it is, 100 million? That's my question.
Okay. Let the director.
So we hold 4.4 million in a letter of credit, which means it's a demand loan. We can cash that in the minute that they don't meet their end of the agreement. It's segregated within their line of credit, and we can call on that, in which we would. The other part of that is that even with our other development charge, we don't collect enough up front, and so you pay from other sources and pay that other source back when you collect the DCs. In this case, we would be looking to finance that from the reserves and then pay it back every year when the DCs are collected from other projects.
Doesn't that assume that the money is there for us to collect? And the reality is, if they close up shop and if they declare bankruptcy, 75% or a portion of or nothing.
Even if they declare bankruptcy, we can still call on that letter of credit. It's with the bank. It's held with the bank.
It's held with the bank.
How long will that take? You know, you then get into a whole legal procedure, and I'm sure we have lawyers here in the room who would say that could take years and years and years to collect.
Okay.
But anyway, thank you for your answer. It doesn't fill me full of enthusiasm.
Okay. You want a break? Okay. All right, we'll go through these two gentlemen, and then we're approaching 8:30. Sir. Sir.
My questions, I look at them. Guy Courvoisier, I've been living here with my wife for 10 years. Most of my questions now say, see Dorothy. I mean, she did it so much better than I could have myself, but I'd like to leave here tonight, and I'm going to suggest that a lot of people would like to know some dollars. So I've got here the new water treatment plant, including the trunk main, the lateral distribution systems, the intake pipeline into the lake, landscaping, the whole smash. What kind of dollars are you looking at? Now, I've looked through documents probably for about 40, 45 hours, and I see all kinds of little bits of numbers here and there based on 2021 dollars. Maybe that's where they need to be drawn from, but I'm sure someone here can help me. It's the same with the new wastewater treatment plant. Trunk main line, the lateral distribution systems, the pipeline into the lake, landscaping, et cetera. And looking at the new regional water treatment plant, I would ask the same. The full smash, what are we looking at for dollars-wise? I haven't heard it tonight, and I thought, maybe indulge me if I've missed it, but that I thought would have been in a presentation.
Give your response. Okay, hang on.
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
for the facility the new waste, is my mic on? It's good. The new wastewater treatment plant, we're gonna reuse the existing outfall, so there's no in-water works, so there's no pipeline to the lake there. That's one of the reasons it's located where it is. The cost right now is projected to be $37 million for the full phase 1 solution. Dave mentioned it earlier, the existing EQ tank is part of that plant. The preliminary preferred technology that was selected, that is the sole concrete tank that will be on the site. The rest will be 2 buildings, so there'll be some availability to do, call it value engineering during design. Right now that's a conceptual estimate, and we think it's fairly reasonable and conservative. So we do think there's options there. For the water treatment plant for Wellington alone, the facility is looking like $30 million. That will require a new intake depending on phasing. That is under study right now and will be available. It's looking neighborhood of 10 million for an intake. And then the regional facility, if it goes regional, would be, we're estimating right now, $58 million on site.
58 million, does that include the trunk line 19 kilometers from here to there?
It does not include the trunk line.
I'm sorry,
to
sir, but I
Picton.
asked for everything, the whole smash.
No, so this is where I'm going. So Picton, you know, the Picton master servicing plan is ongoing. So the facility in Picton is near 100 years old. Projections there, that facility also needs to be replaced. So part of the regional master servicing plan and the Picton plan, there'll be a clear table at the next PICs, which will present cost information. We're still undergoing the cost evaluation for the Picton part of it, as well as the regional part. So I can't speak to those exact numbers at the moment. But the point will be to have a county-wide look. So you'll see how much is a new plant in Wellington, Wellington alone, a new plant in Picton, Picton alone, and then ancillary infrastructure, including intake. You will need a new intake in Picton as well. So imagine that's another significant capital cost.
Significant as?
There was an EA done that put it in tens of millions of dollars for a new intake in Picton. That was performed by another firm previous years.
So you see, thank you, sir. The numbers are there. I'm just trying to get them out. When I asked the question about the wastewater treatment plant and the water treatment plant, and I specifically mentioned trunk lines and lateral lines, were they included in that cost?
The trunk lines that are currently going under tender were not included in that 37 million.
Right. I'm sorry, but this just keeps going. When do we expect to hear
the
what a
trunk
number
line will go to tender, so
is
you'll be
everything?
you'll have a real cost in the upcoming future. And Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 15.
Timing of that?
Yeah, the trunk project for both water and wastewater is actually in the tender phase now. The tender's been released, and it's in that about $15 million approximate construction costs. 15.
Okay.
Is there, does anyone have a number for all these things? Somebody doing the math?
Okay, just let's let Amanda,
please.
Can you respond to that?
Right now, altogether, I don't have the numbers separated, but we have 79.9 million approved in the budgets, which is what has been built into the rate study, in the 2021 rate study. Anything beyond that would have to be right-sized with both the DC and the rates. Those costs are based on the MSP that was undertaken and the dollar values we had at the time when we undertook the development charge study and the rate study.
And it doesn't factor in anything in the regional study or the MSP because we haven't got that far, but also we haven't factored revenue from development in those areas. So, so Amanda's number is what is been considered when we look at the Wellington piece alone.
Okay, so as I said, I looked at a lot of documents. It appears to be $2021. Would that be accurate to say that most of these things were done?
The numbers that I just presented were recent dollars. These are 2022 numbers. 2023 rather, sorry. 2023 dollars.
Okay. And perhaps you're the best person too to tell me what cost overruns look like these days. Average. I have not seen a project yet, and I've studied a few, that came in at cost. What would you say is a reasonable, acceptable to you, sir? overrun?
What are we seeing for cost overruns?
Estimate?
They're very project specific. I mean, that's
Fair enough.
It's a
Similar
loaded question
project
a
then.
bit. And some projects we're closing right now and executing, they've come in under budget. No, we just had one come in under
Please.
budget. The EQ tank, we've had very little change orders. That project has gone very well. So this is projected to be substantially completed at the end of the month. This project has gone well based on how that tender did close. Normally, when you run into risks, it's in the ground. So if you mitigate in-ground risks, then your overruns are less likely. And that's what we're intending to do, or have tried to do.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
Mr. Mayor, will we be kept informed of these numbers as they become real and solidified? And how will we be kept informed?
Well, we've spoken this evening about transparency. So
Right.
Everybody here heard it. So, and as I said earlier, if the information is not being provided and understood, then we will make sure that it is understood. Of course, we're going to be transparent.
Of course, appreciate that,
Well,
Mr. Mayor.
That's why we're here.
Why wouldn't you? Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mooney, and then
Yeah, just one quick point. The gentleman over here said that the county has the highest water and wastewater rates in Canada, and he's very close. 6 or 7 years ago, I spent many hours looking at rates all across Canada, and at that time, the county had both water and wastewater rates in the top 2% in Canada. And I doubt that there's been any improvement since then. So I just wanted to let people know. I reported that fact at the time publicly.
okay. All right, we've got two more people, and then I think we're going to wrap it up. Ma'am?
Good evening. My name is Joanna Wright, and I live at 12 Carla Court. Very quick question. I'd like to know, and I'd like a public answer, are we past the point of no return on this project? Is it carved in stone? Are we here wasting our time because it's already a done deal? Thank you.
Okay. All right, that's a reasonable question. Go through the status of the various components. Just a sec.
So past the point of no return would mean that council has already approved it for construction, and right now we're only at the EA phase. So that's study. It's a study. It's environmental
Still
assessment. Okay, so municipal class environmental assessment process is what we follow. It's a very rigid process, very well defined. It's prescribed by the province. We go beyond minimum requirements for. Excuse me, I'm talking. Thanks. We go beyond the minimum requirements for the Class EA. You've all said that you haven't been consulted with. There's been numerous meetings, and they've all been well advertised. So I encourage you to show up. The point of no return is when council makes the decision and approves a project and construction starts. We're not at that point yet. It's an environmental assessment, which is a study. The next phase is design. And the next phase after that is construction. So there's still time for dialogue.
Okay. Sir.
Ken Douglas in Wellington on the Lake. I have 4 short questions. Caitlin? Be careful.
Okay.
I've had 2 experiences involving him, and I don't have anything good to say about him. Second one. Somebody mentioned a trunk line. Is this from the tower here or up to the development up Belleville Road to KV or KV to Quickham Court?
Okay, hang on, we'll get clarification
Or is it a trunk line from here over to Picton?
So The Wellington Water and Sanitary Trunk Main Project is a trunk line that goes from Belleville Street, essentially the water tower, goes down the Millennium Trail, comes down to Main Street on Clemenson, and then to the plant. And there's also the water trunk also continues down Main Street and comes up to Prince Edward Street. That's the limits of the project. There's the second project that's being studied right now is part of the regional water system, could have a recommendation to put a trunk from Wellington to Picton, but that's still in the study stage.
Okay, now there's a trunk line from Picton over to Schaumburg, serving them with water. Is that correct?
From where to where?
From Picton over to Bloomfield.
Yeah,
That's right.
The Picton distribution system does incorporate Bloomfield as we speak.
So it does. Okay.
All right.
So a few years ago, I belonged to, well, first of all, I belonged to the Romeo Club over at, And anyway, we went for a tour over to Picton to the sewage disposal facility. And that was not too long ago. I mean, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. And somebody up there referred to as the sewage disposal facility over in Picton is getting old.
Okay, well,
It's the water.
Go ahead.
The water plant is very old. The sewage plant is much newer.
Water
Sewer
plant.
plant.
It's the water plant that was built
Down on the lake,
down on the lake.
Okay,
down the harbor.
okay.
Okay.
One last question, short one. Never mind, I can't read my own writing.
Okay. All right, thank you
You're
very
safe on that
much.
one. Thanks very much.
Okay.
But I really, really agree with a lot of comments that are being made by previous speakers tonight. We need more information, and then we're not gonna, we weren't elected people, I know, but I'm sure we have
All right.
some kind of an input, and we will vote at some time later if we're
Okay,
still
thank you
here.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Elaine, last questions to you, and then
May
we're,
I ask just one very quick question? It's based on the fact that we've just been told, and I heard it previously, that this new water main is going to end at Prince Edward Drive. Now that means that over 900 people who live in Wellington on the lake are not going to get one iota of benefit from this whole new system, but we're all going to be paying a water bill. I think that is bloody unfair. I'm sorry, but I just think it's wrong.
okay. Any response? Okay, Elaine, the response is coming? Go ahead, Dave.
So the Wellington on the Lake distribution system is a private system, and that was how the development happened in Wellington on the Lake. With the main improvement that we are tendering right now, we are upsizing the main to the municipal boundary where it connects to Wellington on the Lake. That will provide increases in your fire flow and pressures just because we are bringing a bigger pipe with a bigger water source to the boundary. So there will be benefit to Wellington on the Lake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well then it comes back to transparency because everybody I've been talking to is under the opposite impression. So you've got a job to do in that you need to make sure that if that is what is going to happen, that that information is out there so that we, the consumer, can hear it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we've got no more questions. I'd like to, on behalf of the staff, consultants, and members of council, thank you all very much for coming out tonight and for the questions you've posed. We've taken lots of notes, and I hope we've provided information that is helpful about the projects and how they're evolving. But you can feel free to contact any of the staff members, local councillor, contact me. I'm readily available. But thank you all for your time this evening and interest in this matter and attending. Thank you.